card. Bye.
Joyce Meyer, a woman known for her empowering sermons and inspirational messages, has built an empire by helping millions of people find faith, strength, and purpose. But behind the polished facade of her public persona, there's a side of Joyce that the world never expected to see. One moment, caught on camera without her knowledge, reveals a shocking truth about the woman who's been an icon of Christian ministry for decades. What she didn't know was that the camera was rolling, and what happened next would change the way we see her forever. This is the untold story of the moment Joyce Meyer's true self was revealed, and the world was left in disbelief. The shocking behind-the-scenes moment that no one was supposed to see. The cameras were rolling, but Joyce Meyer was oblivious to them. She was in the midst of preparing for one of her most anticipated speeches, a moment that would surely resonate with her vast audience. But as the event progressed, something unexpected happened, something that would alter the public's perception of her forever. In the background, unbeknownst to Joyce, the camera had caught a side of her personality that was not in alignment with the powerful, poised woman people had come to know. It all started innocently enough. Joyce, known for her high energy and uplifting messages, was preparing for her live sermon in front of thousands of eager listeners. She had been preaching for decades and had a well-rehearsed routine that was always met with applause. But that day, the camera, set to capture her iconic moments for the broadcast, caught something different. In the few minutes before her grand entrance, Joyce let her guard down. While waiting in the wings, Joyce unknowingly let slip a few words that weren't aligned with the image she had spent years building. She was caught on the mic laughing at something her staff had said, but the tone was not what one would expect from the serious, professional public speaker. Her laughter was sharp, even a bit mocking, and it was followed by a sarcastic comment about the audience. It was an offhand remark, something no one could have anticipated coming from someone of her stature. The recording, a seemingly harmless backstage moment, quickly made its way to the public. At first, those who heard it were unsure how to respond. Was this just a fluke, or was it an indication of a side of Joyce Meyer that was not so polished and perfect? The reaction from her supporters was mixed. Some defended her, saying that everyone has moments of imperfection, while others couldn't help but feel betrayed by the glimpse into her true personality. For Joyce, the moment was an eye-opener. She had spent years building a reputation of compassion and understanding, yet this simple moment was now being dissected by the media and her followers. How would she respond? Could she recover from this unintended slip-up, or would it alter her career and ministry forever? Joyce Meyer's scandalous off-camera behavior exposed. The unexpected revelation of Joyce Meyer's backstage behavior rocked the public and sent shockwaves through her ministry. What was meant to be an inspiring and uplifting event turned into a scandal when footage emerged of her unfiltered behavior off-stage. Joyce, who had built her career on the idea of kindness, grace, and selflessness, was suddenly exposed as a woman who could be just as sharp-tongued and sarcastic as any celebrity caught off guard. This was no longer just about a public figure. It was about the contrast between the woman the world had come to adore and the one hidden behind the carefully crafted image. The footage showed Joyce laughing at an offhand comment made by her staff, one that seemed harmless enough, but was followed by a tone that could only be described as condescending. It was a brief moment, but one that had the power to unravel everything she had worked for. As the laughter faded, her voice became sharp, almost mocking as she made a remark about the audience, clearly unaware that the mic was still live. The words weren't malicious, but they weren't the loving, positive affirmations her followers were used to hearing. Instead, it was a fleeting moment of rawness that would now define her in the eyes of millions. When the video first hit the airwaves, it was unclear how to interpret it. Some saw it as an unfortunate slip of the tongue, a private moment that didn't define who Joyce was as a person. She's human, just like the rest of us, her supporters said. We all have moments when we're less than perfect. Others, however, couldn't ignore the disturbing contrast between the Joyce Meyer they saw on stage and the one captured behind the scenes. They couldn't shake the feeling that this was a glimpse into a side of her that had been hidden from view, a side that was perhaps more than just a one-time slip. The public reaction was swift and harsh. Her loyal followers, who had once viewed Joyce as a beacon of kindness and hope, began to question everything they had ever believed about her. If she could be so dismissive and sharp with her staff, how genuine were her teachings? Were the messages of self-love and forgiveness truly coming from a place of sincerity, or was it all just part of a performance? People who had once attended her seminars, looking for real transformation, now found themselves grappling with a painful truth. They had bought into an image, not the woman herself. As Joyce's team scrambled to mitigate the fallout, it became clear that this was more than just a PR disaster. This was a crisis of credibility. Her team issued a statement claiming that Joyce had been under significant stress, working long hours to prepare for the event. While that might have explained her frustration, it did little to change the perception of the public. Apologies were issued, but for many, they felt hollow. It was no longer just about one awkward moment. It was about the larger question of who Joyce Meyer really was. Had the kindness and grace she preached all these years been genuine, or was it simply a well-executed act? For Joyce, this was no longer just about salvaging her reputation. It was about confronting the truth that she had never truly let anyone see the real her. Is Joyce Meyer faking it? As the media storm around Joyce Meyer's backstage incident raged on, a troubling question began to emerge in the minds of her followers. Had they been deceived all along? Joyce had built an empire based on the teachings of self-improvement, love, and compassion. Her message had reached millions, resonating deeply with those who sought guidance and strength from her words. But now, with the camera capturing a side of her that was far from the loving, all-knowing figure on stage, people began to wonder if the woman they had trusted was just another carefully constructed facade, designed to sell books, seminars, and religious products. For years, Joyce had been the epitome of perfection. Her speeches were filled with wisdom, her presence commanding yet compassionate, always offering hope to those who felt lost. She had the perfect blend of humility and authority, which made her one of the most influential women in Christian ministry. But the incident that had been caught on tape opened up an uncomfortable reality. Was her kindness and compassion just part of the show? Was the genuine warmth she radiated in front of millions something she only showed when the cameras were on? The public's trust in her began to crumble as they grappled with the possibility that the Joyce they had followed was a polished, performative version, a version that hid the flaws, impatience, and sharpness that she had never shown in her sermons. People began to dig deeper into her history, looking for signs of this behavior that had never been visible before. Some of her most loyal followers, those who had attended her seminars and bought her books, felt betrayed. They had invested not just money, but their hearts into the wisdom she shared. It wasn't just the laughter or the sarcastic remarks that hurt. They began to question whether Joyce had ever truly lived by the principles she preached. Had she used her platform to build a brand, or had she genuinely been trying to help others find their way? The more they scrutinized, the more they wondered. If Joyce had let something slip on camera, what other parts of herself had she hidden away from her audience? But what was even more troubling to some was that the public had ignored these cracks for so long. Joyce had been carefully curated for years, with every word, every gesture calculated to make her appear as the perfect model of Christian living. She had built a brand based on vulnerability and authenticity, yet here was a moment that shattered that narrative. The realization that this woman, who had built an empire on authenticity, could so easily dismiss people behind the scenes, led many to feel betrayed, not just by her, but by themselves, forever trusting in the perfect image she had presented. The incident was more than just a misstep. It felt like a betrayal of the trust and faith that so many had placed in her. In the wake of the fallout, Joyce's team worked tirelessly to do damage control. Statements were made, interviews were scheduled, and PR strategies were implemented to contain the damage. But the more they tried to patch up the cracks in her public image, the more the public began to dig deeper. Was Joyce Meyer just another celebrity hiding behind a mask, or was she a true example of the selflessness she preached? Was this scandal the result of an overworked woman cracking under the pressure, or was it the unveiling of a much darker truth about the woman who had once seemed so untouchable? The answers weren't clear, but one thing was undeniable. Joyce Meyer's public image was never going to be the same again. The moment that crushed Joyce Meyer's reputation forever. The incident that had initially seemed like a minor slip-up quickly transformed into a full-blown crisis for Joyce Meyer. What started as a seemingly innocent backstage conversation, captured on an accidental recording, began to unravel the very foundation of the image she had spent years building. The moment had been brief, but the impact was lasting, and the consequences were far-reaching. Her supporters, who had once seen Joyce as the epitome of grace and virtue, now found themselves questioning everything they had believed. The polished, inspirational figure they had admired now seemed like a distant memory. As the video continued to spread across social media, the reactions ranged from disbelief to outrage. Joyce's critics seized the opportunity to expose the cracks in her public persona. "This is who she really is," they claimed, pointing to the sharp, mocking tone captured on tape. What Joyce had thought was a private moment was now broadcasted to millions, and the fallout was swift. The message was clear. Joyce Meyer, the woman who preached love and humility, had a side that was anything but compassionate. She had become the target of ridicule and harsh judgment, and it seemed as though there was no way to escape the consequences. The moment was one of true vulnerability for Joyce, but not in the way she had ever intended. It wasn't the kind of vulnerability that would endear her to her audience. It was a raw, unguarded side of her that showed a complete disconnect from the image she had worked so hard to project. In a private setting, Joyce's words revealed a layer of arrogance and frustration that was at odds with her carefully cultivated persona. She had been caught off guard, and the result was a shocking expose of her true feelings about the very people she had spent years uplifting. For Joyce, the pain was real. She had always prided herself on being a model of Christian virtue, and this moment exposed the contradictions in her life. The apology came quickly, but it felt rehearsed to many. She claimed the remarks were not intended for public consumption and were made in a moment of stress. But for many, it wasn't just about the words. It was about what they revealed. They revealed a side of Joyce that had been carefully hidden away, a side that was all too human, but also deeply flawed. The cracks in her public image began to widen, and the very foundation she had built her career on started to shake. Her supporters were torn. Some were quick to forgive, insisting that everyone had moments of imperfection. No one is perfect, they argued. Joyce has helped so many. One mistake shouldn't define her. Others, however, couldn't ignore the feeling of betrayal. For them, this wasn't just a small slip of the tongue. It was a moment of truth, a peek behind the curtain at the real Joyce Meyer. Could they still trust her? Could they continue to follow someone who, in that moment, revealed a side of herself that was far from the compassionate, uplifting leader they had come to admire? The truth was out, and Joyce Meyer was no longer the untouchable figure she once was. She had always been known for her resilience, but this scandal was testing that in ways she had never imagined. Would she be able to rise above the controversy and continue to inspire her followers? Or had the damage been done? The path ahead was uncertain, and the world was watching to see how she would respond to the fallout from the moment that had shattered her image. Was it genuine or just damage control? In the wake of the scandal that exposed a side of Joyce Meyer no one had expected to see, the pressure was on for her to respond. The media was relentless, and her followers were divided. Some defended her, claiming that everyone makes mistakes, and that the recorded moment was simply a lapse in judgment. Others, however, couldn't shake the feeling that the woman they had trusted for years had failed them in a very public way. The question on everyone's mind was whether Joyce's apology would be enough to restore her credibility, or if it would be seen as nothing more than a well-executed attempt at damage control. When Joyce finally addressed the incident in a public statement, her words were measured and carefully chosen. She acknowledged the harm. Her remarks had caused and expressed deep regret for her behavior. "I want to be completely honest with you," Joyce said, her voice soft but steady. "I let my guard down in a moment of stress, and my words didn't reflect the love and grace I try to live by. I know I have let some of you down, and for that, I am truly sorry." The apology, while heartfelt, felt rehearsed to some. It was clear that she had spent hours working with her PR team to craft a response that would reassure her followers while minimizing the damage to her brand. But the question remained: was this apology truly genuine, or was it just another attempt to preserve the empire she had spent years building? For some, the sincerity in her words was enough to quell their doubts. "She's only human," they argued. "We all make mistakes, and Joyce has helped so many. She deserves another chance." However, others were less forgiving. They felt that Joyce had been caught in a moment of vulnerability that revealed a darker side of her personality, one that couldn't simply be brushed aside with a few well-chosen words. "She's been lying to us this whole time," one former supporter said. "How can we trust her again?" As the days went by, Joyce's apology seemed to do little to quell the storm. Some of her most loyal followers continued to stand by her, while others began to question whether they could continue supporting someone who had shown such a stark contrast between her public image and private behavior. The damage was done, and even the most carefully crafted apology couldn't erase the fact that a side of Joyce Meyer had been exposed that would forever change the way people saw her. For Joyce, the apology was a necessary step, but she knew that it wasn't enough. The trust she had built over the years had been fractured, and the road to redemption would be long. She would need to prove, through her actions, that she was more than just the moment that had been captured on tape. Would the public give her the benefit of the doubt, or would this scandal follow her for the rest of her career? Only time would tell, but one thing was clear. Joyce Meyer was no longer the perfect, untouchable figure she had once been. The true test would be whether she could regain the trust of her followers, or if the cracks in her public persona would grow wider with each passing day. Can Joyce Meyer ever regain their trust? After the apology, the real challenge began for Joyce Meyer, regaining the trust of her followers. For years, she had been more than just a preacher. She had been a guiding light, a mentor, and a source of strength for millions. Her teachings on faith, personal growth, and forgiveness had shaped the lives of countless individuals. But now, After the exposure of her off-camera behavior, everything had changed. The public's perception of her had been shattered, and Joyce was left to wonder, could she ever rebuild what had been so carelessly broken? The backlash from the scandal was intense, and it wasn't just the media that was unforgiving. Her most loyal supporters, the ones who had followed her career from the beginning, were now questioning everything they had once believed about her. The trust they had placed in Joyce was no longer as solid as it once had been. "I've been following her for years, and now I don't even know who she is," one longtime follower admitted. "What else has she been hiding from us?" The shock of seeing a side of Joyce that was so different from the persona she had projected made many feel as though they had been deceived. Joyce's team worked tirelessly to manage the situation, scheduling interviews and making public appearances to reaffirm her commitment to her ministry and her followers. But the truth was, no amount of media appearances or well-crafted statements could undo the damage caused by her unintended slip. The world had seen the cracks in her public image, and it was clear that they weren't going away anytime soon. Joyce wasn't just facing a PR crisis, she was facing a crisis of faith. Her faith in herself, in her purpose, and in the people who had trusted her had all been called into question. But Joyce wasn't the type to back down easily. She knew that the road to redemption would be long, but she was determined to face it head-on. She began to spend more time engaging directly with her followers, appearing at smaller events where she could speak to people one-on-one, and showing a more personal side of herself. She admitted that the incident had been a wake-up call for her, and she committed to being more open, more authentic, and more human in her future endeavors. "I'm not perfect," she told her audience in a heartfelt speech, "but I'm willing to grow, and I'm willing to do the work." Yet, despite her efforts, the question lingered. Would the public ever truly forgive her? Some followers were willing to give her a second chance, believing that no one should be defined by one moment of weakness. Others, however, felt that the cracks in Joyce's public persona had exposed a fundamental truth about her character. She was just like everyone else, imperfect and flawed. For them, this scandal was more than just a momentary lapse in judgment. It was the realization that Joyce Meyer's public image had been just that, an image, carefully constructed for the masses. The woman they had admired for so long was now just another person in the spotlight, vulnerable to the same criticism and scrutiny as anyone else. As the months passed, Joyce worked to prove that she was more than just her mistakes. She faced the consequences of her actions with a level of humility that was new to her followers. But whether that would be enough to restore the trust of those who had once seen her as a perfect role model remained uncertain. The road to redemption was unclear, and the future of Joyce Meyer's ministry was now in question. Would she rise from the ashes of her scandal, or would the public's perception of her forever be changed? The damaging impact. As the scandal surrounding Joyce Meyer continued to dominate the headlines, its impact on her ministry became more evident. Her sermons, once filled with uplifting messages of strength and hope, now faced intense scrutiny. What had once been a thriving ministry, with millions tuning in to hear her preach, now found itself on the defensive. Her followers, once unwavering in their loyalty, were now split. Some continued to support her, while others began to distance themselves from the woman who had once been their spiritual leader. Joyce's ministry was built on a foundation of trust that she had cultivated over decades. Her messages resonated deeply with people, offering them hope and guidance in difficult times. But the scandal had shaken that trust to its core. The more people reflected on her past teachings, the more they began to question their validity. Was the advice Joyce had given truly grounded in sincerity? Or was it merely part of an image she had created to maintain her public persona? Those who had once sought solace in her words now found themselves wondering if they had been misled. For Joyce, the consequences of the scandal weren't just personal, they were professional. The fallout affected every aspect of her ministry. Donations, which had once flowed in abundance, began to dwindle. Attendance at her events dropped, and the once bustling online platforms that had shared her messages now seemed quieter. Sponsors pulled back from partnerships, wary of associating with someone whose reputation was now in tatters. Joyce's team, which had always been well-organized and confident, found themselves scrambling to maintain the momentum they had built over the years. The empire she had spent decades constructing was beginning to show cracks, and she was powerless to stop it. The question was no longer just about Joyce's personal redemption. It was about the future of her ministry. Could she rebuild the trust that had been shattered by her actions, or was the damage irreversible? Many of her longtime supporters continued to defend her, but even they could not deny the truth that had been exposed. Joyce Meyer, the woman they had admired, was just as flawed as anyone else. For some, this revelation was a bitter pill to swallow. The idealized image they had of her no longer seemed attainable, and the idea of her as a perfect role model was gone. However, amidst the damage, there were those who still believed in Joyce's mission. They saw her apology as a step toward healing, and many rallied around her, believing that everyone deserved a second chance. These loyal followers believed that Joyce's ministry could bounce back if she remained transparent and showed genuine growth from the experience. They held on to the hope that she could rise above the scandal and continue her work in a way that was even more powerful, by using her flaws as part of her story, teaching others about redemption, humility, and growth. Yet the long-term impact of this scandal remained uncertain. Joyce had spent decades building a brand of perfection, but now that brand was irreparably changed. The future of her ministry would depend on whether she could regain the trust of her followers, face her own flaws with authenticity, and prove that she was capable of learning and growing from the very public mistakes she had made. The coming months would be crucial in determining whether Joyce Meyer could recover from the scandal, or whether her legacy would forever be overshadowed by it. Joyce Meyer's scandal has forever changed the way the world sees her. What was once a ministry built on trust and inspiration is now a story of redemption and rebuilding. The truth, once hidden, is now out in the open, and the question remains: can Joyce reclaim the trust of her followers, or has the damage been done? Only time will tell. What do you think? Can Joyce Meyer rise from the fallout of this scandal, or has the world seen the last of her empire? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates.